There we go. Now I'm live. Gotta figure out technology. I'm a little slow today. So today's Sunday afternoon. Just sitting here. I took a little day off here. Went up north. I've got a place up north where I go to relax. Been putting a lot of hours in with my job and um, fixing up properties for my portfolio. That's how I do it. I build equity in them. Do a lot of the work myself. It works great to kind of build up that equity. I had to start over here about 5 years ago, so I started from scratch again and rebuilt the portfolio. Long story, I can get into it sometime, but that's not what I'm going to rant about today. So just got my coffee sitting by the fireplace. Got my continuing ed, some of my continuing ed out of the way online this morning. Took care of some chores around the property here, and now I just kind of was looking on X and saw kind of the usual suspects talking about the housing market, right? You got we'll call them doomers that the housing crash is going to hit. You've got this group that is saying, or a group of people saying that we've got a housing oversupply, that there's way too many houses for the population. Um, I'm going to try to share this screen. I did this video earlier, and when I did that, I was talking for like 20 minutes. I had all this great information, and I realized that none of this actually shared to the viewer on there. So I had to delete that post and start over. So bear with me here, see if I can manage it and try to grab one of these screens here. Okay. So this is what I saw online today. And this chart is going to show you that the housing inventory is that blue line. And look at how fast that housing inventory went up. And then this is your households. The households are going up too, but the argument is there's so much more housing than households. So therefore we have too much housing supply. There's a lot of context left off of this. I look at the same thing and I don't come to that conclusion. So I want to jump here and I'm working on a laptop here and I've got one of these mouses, and you just tap it funny and it just does all sorts of weird things. Here's the same chart going back to 1940. It looks really different, doesn't it? So if we go way back here, this is going to track your households. This is household formation. Now we're in the 70s here, and we go up. That chart that was shared online starts right about here in 2000, 2002, somewhere in there. And that's when they started tracking housing units. So the argument is this line is so much higher than the households that, to me, if we stand back here and just stare at that, there's not a lot of deviation between those two lines. So this does not show me that we overbuilt our housing units from this chart. There may be markets out there that we have. I'm not going to argue that point. You got to look into your own market. But to post online, and I'm going to call it misrepresent that the housing market is oversupplied based off of this chart and leaving out all the other context, that's not doing anyone any good. So that one kind of got me a little frustrated today. And the reason I'm concerned about this is, one is I'm trying to figure out where to invest next, right? So the strategy I've been doing is buy a fixer upper, a single family house or a townhouse. I started with the townhouses because they were undervalued. I could get those cheaper than I could per unit than buying a duplex. So per unit, the acquisition cost was much cheaper, higher cash flow return, easier to rent, generally speaking, in the area I preferred, because a lot of the duplexes were in the older markets, and that's not really my market where I'm at. There's good opportunities in those, but so that's why I went that route. And then obviously I went into single family and been acquiring single family. My skills, I'm just kind of a hands-on person. I've been a builder, developer, and I'm not afraid to pick up tools and work on the project. So I can take those skills and I'm not a spreadsheet warrior. I don't sit there on the computer and just manipulate numbers and figure out how to move numbers around. It's that's not the business. The business isn't driving the Ferrari around, right? It's providing housing for people, and it's providing a service. So you've got to come in and provide a good product. And one way to do that is to buy something. Generally, what I'm finding are like estates, or someone's moved out, family doesn't want to deal with it. So I end up with all the stuff in the house, you know, take dumpster loads of their personal belongings out of there. Family just kind of wipes their hand of it. They don't want to deal with it, and the houses are in tough shape. You're replacing bathrooms, you're replacing roofs, and sometimes furnaces, electrical, pretty extensive remodeling. Sometimes it's less, but depends on the one you get into. They're getting harder and harder to find. You can still find them, but um, so that's kind of where that's where I get my product from to then provide product for people to rent. Um, and that's the service business I'm in. So I do a lot of the work myself to make the equity, so I can kind of leverage my skills and my time and build my portfolio that way. I've rebuilt my portfolio. Started it a little over 5 years ago. About 5 years ago, I had other rentals before then, but life circumstances, divorce, I had to restart over. Basically started over 5 years ago. So now I built that up pretty fast, using those skills. Now my next phase is kind of looking for the opportunities in the marketplace. Where are those opportunities going to be? So there's a lot of talk that there's an oversupply of housing. This is why I'm concerned about the stuff that's posted online. But then when you dig into the local numbers, that doesn't add up. Um, I'm doing the research. I don't have the answer yet, but I'll kind of share where I'm coming from on this. Is there's a lot of people trying to buy these houses. There's a lot of Excel warriors that go through on the spreadsheet warriors and run the numbers. They hire a lot of the work out, so I've got a competitive edge there. But I'm starting to believe and starting to see that if I can get the land right, I can build new cheaper than I can buy and fix up these properties, even with me doing the work. Now, granted, I've got the background, I've got the builder's license, and I've got to update it, but it's an easy transition for me to step into. So I'm really concerned about if we have too much housing or not. So one way to calculate that, and that's kind of the preferred method, and it's been used for years, is it's based on employment. And you say, well, why is housing based on employment? If you watch Ken McElroy, he'll say housing needs people. So if you buy housing where there's no people, you don't have any renters. Well, thanks, Captain Obvious, but he's absolutely right. So, what do people need? People need jobs. So, if you go to National Association of Realtors tracks it, our local, they call it a Met Council tracks a lot of this data too. They bury it though; it's kind of hard to dig up. You have to piecemeal it together. But NAR does a pretty good overall view of it. And Builders Association had it. I can't find it on their website, but they've also got a similar data where they're tracking the jobs. So people move where there's jobs. So where is there job growth, is where there's going to be housing needs, and whether that's new housing or not. So you kind of want to look at your local market and say, are jobs growing or are they contracting? If it's contracting like Detroit did in the 80s with the auto industry shrinking, then all of a sudden you end up with house values collapsing. Same happened up in northern Minnesota in the Iron Range. Beautiful homes, and a lot of the iron ore, the mines closed, and then there was a huge surplus of homes. So housing does follow jobs. So start tracking the job numbers. So I'm kind of digging into that. Kind of the ratio is 1.2 to 1.5. Was it houses per job? Yes. 1.2 to 1.5. I got to look that up. Now I'm having a Sunday morning. Yeah, 1.2 to 1.5 housing units per job. So where I'm at, we're at about 2 million jobs, give or take, right now, and we're at about a million 550 housing units. So that's about a 1.3-ish ratio. So it's adequately supplied. There's not a huge discrepancy there. But if you start going into the local market, you can kind of see where there's pockets of where that housing unit's needed. And a lot of it is going to be different neighborhoods, different school districts. You kind of look for those opportunities. And then if you can find the land right and build the right product, there's great opportunity there. So where is that opportunity? Well, you've got you kind of go back into that macro and look at the generations. So you have, we've got the oldest generation right now is the GI generation, the World War II guys, and they're getting up there. They're in the 80s and 90s, and they're dying off, so that they're getting to be a very small demographic. And then right behind them, they're the silent generation. So they're in their 70s and 80s, early 80s, and they're kind of that. They were born during wartime. They were very protected. Uh, they were kind of that the golden era of uh, the U.S. And then their kids are the baby boomers, and we all like to make fun of the baby boomers, right? They were the spoiled brat generation that grew up with the golden age of America, so to speak. A lot of optimism, economy's growing strong, so they grew up during those times. And don't get me wrong, they had turbulent times too, and the generation that they didn't have not a total cakewalk for them, but we do like to make fun of them. Then that's a huge generation, and then that bubble kind of comes back down. They call that the boom, and then there's Gen X. That's where I fit into. We're kind of that in between the millennials and the baby boomers. The baby boomers have the majority of the wealth, not all of them. A lot of them are going to have a real hard time funding retirement, but predominantly they control the wealth in the U.S. And then right behind Gen X is the millennial generation and Gen Z, um, or Gen Y, and they're coming in. Both those generations are big, but the millennials are bigger than the boomers. So that's going to provide added demand for housing. The millennials are a ways off. They're about 6, 7 years behind where Gen X and where the baby boomers are acquiring their first house. They kind of came of age during that whole uh, the Great Recession, right? So everything was delayed for them. School, student loan debt, plus job opportunities were down during the Great Recession, and that lasted what, 8 years. I think officially it's like 3 or 4 years on the books, but no, it was a long time. Those were tough years. So they had a delay in the housing, so they're coming into the housing market. Baby boomers are starting to retire, so those are your two opportunities on where housing is needed, and some of them will need rental housing, some of them will need owner occupied housing. We ran through these shortage on interest rates, right? We came out of the Great Recession, and there was a huge surplus of foreclosed homes. People just walked away from their loans because they were on these variable rate loans. So they just walked away, let the bank take them. The banks took them back, tried to sell them off, but wouldn't lend money. So who steps in but Wall Street money to go buy these? So now you have these huge investors coming into the housing market, sucking up all that inventory, but the demographics were still there to support that value. It's just there was no money in the system and no jobs to acquire these houses. So a lot of these houses went into uh, companies like BlackRock is the only one that comes to mind, but these the asset acquisitions came in and bought large tracts of them. They don't own the majority of the housing in the U.S. It's still a small percentage, but enough to make a difference. So then, with these low interest rates came out, a lot of people saw the return on that investment, and so a lot of people were buying these properties. And then a lot of syndicators came out of the woodwork. I'm going to call them these spreadsheet warriors. Some of them know what they're doing, don't get me wrong. There's some very skilled syndicators out there, but there was also some new ones that really didn't understand the housing market, knew their way around a spreadsheet, and put together syndications and built apartment buildings. We're running on basically thin margins to begin with. And when the interest rate shifted and they're on variable rate debt, they're getting into some trouble. So that's posing some new opportunities coming down the pipeline. And as I'm ranting here, I'm just kind of trying to explain, or I'm trying to my own thought process, thank you, on where I see opportunities coming. I don't have answers, I'm asking questions. So you have a lot of opportunity coming on these apartment buildings that may get in trouble. Now, I'm not sitting here with Wall Street money where I can take down a 300 unit apartment building and save it from bankruptcy or foreclosure. Um, but there may be some smaller apartment buildings that I may be able to step into, or some other commercial property opportunities. So I'm going to keep a lookout on those. I'm more of a smaller player as far as my resources, my special skills to be able to step in and do the construction, general contracting, do a lot of the work myself. If you have those skills, reach out to me. I can teach you the real estate end of it. My career was in real estate, with the background in construction. Construction's how I got into real estate. But there's opportunity there. The next opportunity is as these boomers are retiring. Right now, they're still really healthy, right? They're in that travel phase where they're moving to the sunshine states. They're going to go have fun in the sun. Um, Historically, the generations would go down, enjoy the sun for a few years. Then, as they start to get old, they miss their grandkids and they move back to the northern cities. That's just kind of been that tradition over time. I think we're going to see that again, but there's something that else that entered the market that I don't know how to put my finger on. Is will that happen this time? Because America's become a lot more mobile. There's a big migration across the country. Um, the jobs, you don't have to locate to certain cities anymore for the jobs. That was always my market's wheelhouse. I think we were like the largest concentration of Fortune 500 countries in the companies in the country. Right, we had General Mills, we had Pillsbury, Best Buy, Target, and a bunch of others. Burlington Northern Railroad. You had all these huge players in a small market. 2-3 million people. So you had plenty of jobs and very well-paying jobs. Medical companies, medical device companies, and tech companies. So very diversified. So that was always a strength. That's kind of going away because now a lot of these will let you work from home and they've been able to relocate. I'm not seeing that population dip yet. I'm not seeing the job losses, but I don't know if those jobs being recorded locally, if they're actually living here or if they're living down in Arizona, Florida, or wherever and telecommuting in. So that's not showing up in the stats yet. So fortunately, I'm a small investor where I'm not staking out, putting out 500 units like a national home builder, 1,000 units. I'm onesie twosies, right? So if I go build a house, I build one or two houses or four or five houses. I'm probably not going to get hurt. I've got the pulse on the market enough. If I'm gambling a lot more units, that's where you got to be careful on the data. So right now I'm looking on the opportunities on there is a need for housing for the millennial generation coming up. The baby boomers haven't been moving out of their houses. So there's not a lot of inventory for sale. And even if the boomers wanted to move out, there's nothing for them to move into. They don't have that housing supply they need. They're in too good a health and too young still to go into any sort of assisted living. They're out having fun. They may need to want to get into one level living, one level townhomes, detached townhomes. That seems to be pretty popular right now. Those get bought up real quick, but those get real expensive real fast. So that only hits a small segment of the market. Um, they're going to end up leaving a lot of these, we're going to call them McMansions. They're Some say they're falling out of style, that the millennials don't want them. I don't think so. I think if the millennials can buy them right, the millennials will love them. They just they don't like them because they don't feel they can afford them, and they probably can't right now. But they will be able to because those job openings are happening for them. So the millennials are going to start getting some purchasing power real soon. Like I said, they've got a 6-7 year trail behind Gen X and the baby boomers where they were at the same age. So there's going to be need for that housing as well. So it's kind of, where do I focus in on? There's a lot of opportunities out there. The market's kind of in flux right now. But I think one thing for sure is there is a need for more housing. The other thing, that chart and what the doomers are saying on there is, if you see that number of housing units, they're not accounting the houses that can't be lived in. There's about a 10% vacant housing ratio across the country right now. And I think that's pretty typical. So housing doesn't last forever, right? You start getting over 100 years old, they become run down. Some housing units catch fire, have other problems. So about 10% of the housing units are uninhabitable. And then you have some other markets like up in Minnesota, the Iron Range. I talked about that, where a lot of these mining towns may have additional housing because there's not as many need for, or some of the mines are still running, but they don't need the same kind of workforce. Same in the farming communities. So a lot of that additional housing is in those markets and not where it needs to be. So start following those job reports, and figure out where you can provide housing, where you can provide your skill, what your skill set is. If you're great in financing, that's a great skill set. If you're good with tools and working, if you got construction background, there's huge opportunity for you in this. And the other side of the business is not difficult to learn. You've got the hard part already down. So that's what I've got. Those are kind of my Sunday rantings here. I'm taking a little time off and just kind of thinking about this stuff. Just thought I'd share my thoughts with you on a Sunday afternoon. So with that, I'll sign off. If you have further questions, just go ahead and post them, and I will be in touch. Until next time, have a good one.